The film opens with a dark fairy tale. Long ago, there lived a young deer named Bambi with his mother deep in the forest. But one tragic day, a poacher killed his mother, leaving Bambi to grow up in loneliness and grief. As time passed, Bambi matured into an adult and eventually found love with a doe named Faline. Together, they were blessed with a fawn, bringing a brief moment of happiness into Bambi's life. Unfortunately, that joy did not last long. His child was killed in a horrific accident, struck by a truck carrying toxic waste. Soon after, his beloved wife was murdered at the hands of the truck driver himself. Devastated and consumed by despair, Bambi drank from the poisoned river, hoping for death. But instead of dying, he transformed into a monstrous and terrifying creature, driven only by one purpose: vengeance. Sometime later, a woman named Xana was traveling with her young son, Benji. They were on their way to her ex-husband's family home to celebrate Thanksgiving. Xana hoped the trip would help Benji take his mind off video games and ease the sadness he felt from missing his father, Simon. At first, the journey seemed uneventful, but things quickly took a turn. Benji began to feel carsick, his face pale and restless. Since Xana hadn't brought a bag with her, she decided to pull over, giving Benji a chance to step outside before he got sick. After that brief stop, they continued their journey. But deep in the forest, their car was suddenly rammed by a terrifying figure, flipping it violently onto its side. The attacker revealed itself to be none other than Bambi, now a monstrous creature consumed by vengeance for the death of his family. The driver was trapped inside the wreckage, crushed by the twisted metal. Bambi pressed down on the overturned car with merciless force, determined to finish him off. Meanwhile, Xana and Benji were lucky enough to escape the wreck, running in desperation as the monstrous deer raged behind them. Elsewhere, Simon's mother Mary stood facing the forest, calling out Bambi's name. It was as if she had a strange bond with the creature. Mary suffered from dementia and often became disoriented, which is why Simon's brother Andrew and his wife Harriet always had to watch over her. When Harriet realized Mary was outside alone, she quickly led her back into the house. Andrew and Harriet had a son named Harrison, who had been spoiled all his life. Because of this, Harrison grew up reckless and disrespectful, often mocking Mary and cruelly calling her insane. Not long after, Xana and Benji finally arrived at the family home. At the same time, Benji's father Simon had not yet come to the family gathering he had promised. He was still at work, speaking on the phone with his group. From the conversation, it was revealed that something very important needed to be resolved that night. Meanwhile, Xana told her family about the terrifying attack by Bambi that they had just gone through. Aware of the danger, Andrew decided to call the police. Unfortunately, there was no signal in the area, so he asked his brother Joshua to climb the hill in search of reception. After that, Xana noticed Benji's injured leg and quickly treated the wound. At the same time, Simon's companions discovered the wreck of the destroyed car. Among the remains, they found a phone that belonged to Xana. Before they could react, the eerie sound of Bambi echoed through the night, startling them and putting them on edge. The three men braced themselves, fearing that the monstrous creature could attack at any moment. Back at the house, Xana was still tending to her son's wound when she grew upset by Harrison's cruel behavior toward her grandmother Mary. In that moment, she also noticed one of Mary's eerie paintings of a deer that looked frightening and unnatural. Elsewhere, Simon's companions remained on high alert, but in their panic, one of them accidentally shot Joshua, who was still trying to find a phone signal. Realizing their fatal mistake, they chose to hide Joshua's body so that the authorities would never discover what had happened. Meanwhile, Benji stayed near Mary, with Harrison continuing to bully her. He told Benji that Mary was insane and that nothing she said should be taken seriously. When Harrison was called away by his mother, Benji's curiosity grew stronger. He began to wonder about Mary's strange behavior, noticing how unsettled she looked, as if haunted by some unseen terror. When Benji glanced at her disturbing drawings, Mary only stared blankly out into the garden, as though she was waiting for something to appear. Not long after, Bambi suddenly burst into the room. Andrew's family was stunned as the monstrous deer forced its way into the house. Bambi went on a violent rampage, sending everyone into a state of pure panic. Terrified, Harriet tried to hide in the bathroom. Unfortunately, Bambi managed to track her down, breaking through the door to attack. Meanwhile, Xana, Mary, Benji, Andrew, and Harrison rushed outside toward a car parked in the yard. As Andrew struggled to start the engine, they suddenly realized that Harriet had been left behind inside the house. Tragically, before their very eyes, Harriet was caught by Bambi. The beast struck her down in brutal fashion, tearing her body apart until she was ripped in two. They immediately stepped on the gas, desperate to escape Bambi's pursuit. Andrew drove as fast as he could, but the monstrous deer, now possessing strength far beyond any normal creature, was able to keep pace with the speeding car. At one point, Bambi's sheer power nearly caused them to crash. Fortunately, through quick thinking and teamwork, they managed to restart the car and narrowly broke free from the relentless beast's chase. Meanwhile, Simon's companions, who were searching through the forest, finally arrived at Andrew's home, only to find it in ruins. Inside, they discovered Mary's terrifying paintings of the monstrous deer. Behind the house, they came across Harriet, who was still barely alive despite her body being torn in half. Pitying her unbearable condition, one of them, named Michael, chose to end her suffering once and for all. After driving for some distance, Andrew's group was forced to stop when the road was blocked by a fallen tree. Andrew, Harrison, and Xana got out to figure out how to move it, while Benji stayed behind trying to comfort Mary by telling him stories about his father, Simon. Outside, Andrew and Harrison attempted to pull the tree with a rope, while Xana returned to the car to sit beside Benji, who was now in the driver's seat. She tried to calm her son, reassuring him that everything would be fine. But before they could catch their breath, Bambi suddenly appeared right in front of them. Panicking, Xana shouted for Benji to hit the gas. What she did not realize was that Andrew's foot had been tangled in the rope, dragging him harshly across the asphalt as the car sped forward for several miles. Harrison, left behind, ran into the forest in a desperate attempt to escape. It soon became clear that Bambi's target was not Xana, but Harrison, who was now alone among the trees. The beast relied on its heightened sense of smell to track its prey. Knowing this, Harrison moved slowly, trying not to be detected. Unfortunately, he stumbled and fell into a pile of animal waste. When Bambi came closer, it did not detect the scent of a human, and eventually left Harrison behind. After driving for some time, the car Benji was steering finally ran out of fuel, forcing them to stop in the middle of the road. Xana stepped out and told Benji to stay with Mary. It was then that she realized Andrew had died, his face mangled from being dragged along the asphalt. Curious, Benji left the car to join his mother. During that moment of distraction, Mary wandered off into the forest on her own. Shocked, Xana and Benji quickly ran after her.
Elsewhere, Harrison was still trying to find a way out of the forest. Panic took over as he heard movement coming from the dark bushes. Relieved for a second, he discovered it was only a rabbit, but his frustration led him to kick it away. Moments later, more rabbits emerged in large numbers. Something was wrong with them. They moved unnaturally fast, their eyes wild, their bodies corrupted by the same toxic chemicals that had transformed Bambi. Harrison backed away slowly, hoping not to provoke them. But fate turned against him. He stumbled into a hunter's trap, his head caught painfully between the metal jaws. Helpless, he was swarmed by the vicious rabbits, torn apart as they devoured him alive. What made the event even more disturbing was that the entire scene was captured on hidden surveillance cameras, revealing that someone had been watching the forest all along. Back with Xana and Benji, the two tried to persuade Mary to return to the car. Instead, Mary muttered incoherently, speaking to herself about her own death. At one point, Benji lit a flare, but Xana, afraid it would attract Bambi, quickly told him to extinguish it. To their horror, Mary then stumbled upon a grisly sight. Scattered across the ground were bones and human body parts, proof that they had wandered straight into Bambi's lair. Moments later, the monstrous deer appeared right in front of them and immediately attacked. By sheer luck, they managed to run to the main road and escape its wrath. There they encountered Michael and his group, who decided to take them back to their base in order to protect them. On the way, Xana urged Michael to report everything to the authorities, but Michael refused, insisting that everything would be handled and that there was no need to worry. When they arrived at the base, a distant noise caught everyone's attention. Michael grew suspicious and quickly went to check it out with caution. Fortunately, the source of the sound turned out to be Simon, who had just emerged from the control room. Overjoyed, Benji immediately ran to hug his father. However, the reunion was tainted by disappointment. Xana soon discovered that Simon was part of the hunting group. The husband, who had always claimed to be busy with business, was in fact deeply involved with them. Feeling betrayed, she confronted him. Their heated argument was overheard by Benji, who grew even more disheartened with both of his parents. While the tension boiled inside, Benji heard the cry of a fawn. Drawn by the sound, he quietly slipped away to investigate. What he found shocked him. Two of Michael's men, Eddie and Tyler, were holding Bambi's child captive, planning to use it as bait. The situation grew even more complicated when Xana tried to borrow a phone from the group to call the police. Michael quickly raised her weapon and forbade any contact with the authorities. At that moment, the truth was revealed. Their mission was not to seek help, but to put an end to everything by exterminating Bambi along with the other mutated animals. After Michael and the others left the room, Xana realized that Benji was gone. Panicked, she rushed to search for him and eventually discovered that he was secretly watching Eddie torment Bambi's child. Meanwhile, Tyler, desperate to relieve himself, wandered off to find a quiet spot. After finishing, he suddenly sensed Bambi's presence as soon as he turned on his flashlight. When Tyler failed to return, Eddie decided to look for him. What he found was grim. His companion had already been brutally killed by Bambi. Moments later, Eddie spotted Bambi emerging from the shadows, drawing closer with every step. At the same time, Benji felt sympathy for the small fawn and chose to release it. His action, however, was noticed by Jo, one of Michael's female companions who was monitoring the CCTV. She immediately informed Michael about what had happened. Fearing her plan would unravel, Michael rushed to chase Benji, determined to stop him, even if it meant taking his life. Meanwhile, Eddie, horrified by the deer's savagery, sprinted toward the car in a frantic attempt to escape. Sadly, no matter how hard he tried, he was powerless, and in the end, Bambi tore him apart. Meanwhile, Xana and Simon were still searching the forest for Benji. Back at the base, Bambi's sharp sense of smell grew more dangerous.
After killing Eddie, the beast nearly devoured Mary, who was already weak and helpless. Just as Bambi was about to attack her, the commotion caused by Joe drew its attention, and the monstrous deer turned on her instead. Cornered, she ran into the kitchen and fired at a small gas cylinder, triggering a massive explosion. Soon after, Michael encountered Benji. Furious, he raised his weapon, ready to kill the boy. At that tense moment, Xana and Simon appeared, trying to defuse the situation. But when Benji refused to hand over the fawn, Michael aimed his gun directly at him. By sheer luck, Bambi arrived just in time, its body scorched but still alive, a terrifying sign of its incredible resilience. The beast charged forward and gored Michael, dragging him screaming into the forest. As Michael's phone fell to the ground, Xana tried to grab it, but Simon selfishly snatched it away. Instead of protecting his family, he revealed his true cruelty, caring only for himself. When Benji finally came face to face with Bambi, Simon abandoned them completely, walking away without a trace of remorse. At that moment, Xana realized the truth. Bambi had never wanted to kill them. The beast only wanted its child back. She urged Benji to stay calm and return the fawn to its mother. The situation slowly calmed when Bambi's fawn tried to soothe its mother, giving Xana the chance to pull Benji away from the raging beast. But the peace did not last long. Michael suddenly opened fire on Bambi in a reckless spray of bullets. Before he could finish, a shotgun rang out and struck Michael in the head. To everyone's shock, the shot had come from Mary, who had finally grown fed up with the cruelty of the hunters. Mortally wounded from his many injuries, Bambi collapsed and died before their eyes. Although the terror had ended, the fawn, newly reunited with its parent, grieved deeply. Its mournful gaze seemed to carry a warning that one day it might rise to seek vengeance against humankind. At the same time, Simon was driving away when he noticed something strange among his belongings. He stopped the car to investigate, only to find that a mutant rabbit had slipped inside unnoticed. For Simon, it was the end. The seemingly harmless creature revealed its deadly nature, viciously tearing him apart.